Hello everyone, welcome to today's class. Let's move on to language focus. Although awake, brain surgery is gaining popularity. It's still pretty unusual for doctors to have a patient play the saxophone during the procedure. So we're concentrating on it's unusual. Alright? It's unusual. Use it's unusual for somebody to do something. To describe something that doesn't happen very often. Okay, so it's unusual to do something. For someone to do something. There are two ways you can do it. It's unusual for somebody to do something, or it's simply it's unusual to do something. All right, you can remove the person. So we said that it doesn't happen very often. So what does this mean? What doesn't happen very often? 자주 일어나지 않다. Okay? To not happen very often. So another word, let's look at this word, unusual. Unusual. So in English, you might know it sometimes as strange. 이상하다. But in this situation, it means to be not common, or as we said, doesn't happen very often. So this is the B is what we're going to talk about today. So let's have a look at our example sentence. In the US, it's unusual for who? Young adults to live with their parents. In the US, it's unusual for young adults to live with their parents. 미국에서 젊은 성인들이 그들의 부모님과 함께 사는 것은 드문 일이다. So, though it is normal in South Korea, in the US and many other Western countries, it is unusual, not common, for young adults to live with their parents. Let's have a look at the second example. It's unusual for me to have more than 1 or 2 beers. 나는 맥주를 한두 잔 이상 마시는 것이 보통이 아닙니다. So this person really does not drink a lot of beer. They usually drink 1 or 2 beers. If it's more, it's unusual, not common for them. Now what you can't say is, I am unusual to have more than 1 or 2 beers. The subject needs to be it, not I. But what the main important point is that it's not common and it doesn't happen very often. So, it's unusual. It's unusual for her to be late. Okay, she's always early. 항상 일찍이에요. 근데 그녀는 항상 일찍 하지만 이번에 지각했어요. 그래서 좀 it's not normal. Alright? Let's look at number 2. 2번. It was only later when he saw the video of his procedure that he realized it was a bit more serious than that. So we are concentrating for our second one on it was only later that. So it was only later that. So we use it was only later that to describe some delayed event. So what does it mean to have a delayed event? What does the word delay mean? Delay means what? 미루다 or 연기하다. And an event is usually what? 사건, right? So if we look back here, it was only later when he saw the video of his procedure, so after his surgery, 수술 후에 영상을 봤는데 it looked 생각보다 더 생각했어요. So if we look at the other example, the internet was invented back in 1983, but it was only later that it gained popularity. 인터넷은 1984년에 발명되었지만 그것이 인기를 얻는 것은 나중이었다. So though it was invented in 1983, it was only later that it gained popularity. Like I think in the late 90s, it became more popular. Or the next one, I used to think that my hometown had the best food in the world. It was only later, after I traveled a bit, that I changed my mind about that. 나는 내 고향 세계 최고의 음식을 가지고 있다고 생각하곤 했다. I used to think that my hometown had the best food in the world. But it was only later, after I traveled, 제가 여행을 좀 한 후에 that I changed my mind about that. 그것에 대한 생각을 바꾼 것은 그 후였습니다. Before I traveled, 여행 좀 하기 전에 내 고향 세계 최고 음식을 가지고 있다고 생각했어요. 근데 여행한 후에 제 마음 바꿨어요. So it was only later, after the event. Now, let's look at the language focus quiz. 1번. In my country, it's unusual for students to. So remember, it's unusual. When we go back up here, not common, doesn't happen very often. So in my country, it's unusual. What is unusual in my country? Let's say Australia, to go to many after-school programs. So 호주에서 학생들은 많은 방과 후 프로그램, 학원을 가는 것은 드문 일이에요. 한국 학생들은 자주 학원에 가요. 학교 끝나고. 근데 호주 같은 경우에는 안 가요. Maybe one, maybe two, but not many. Okay. 2번. It's very unusual for me to, but one time, say, drink a lot of alcohol, but one time I got smashed. It's very unusual for me to drink a lot of alcohol, but one time I got smashed. 제가 술을 많이 마시는 것은 매우 드문 일이지만 한 번은 정말 취했어요. 3번. Mobile has existed since, but it was only later that it became famous. Let's say mobile phones. And then we have to change has to have. Mobile phones have existed since, the late 90s? Maybe earlier? The 90s? Let's just say the 90s. But it was only later that it became famous. 휴대폰은 90년대부터 존재해왔지만 그것이 유명해진 것은 그 후였다. So, though they've existed for a long time, it was only later that they became famous. And remember, 3번 it was only later. And 4번, I used to think that, it was only later when, So I used to think that ghosts were real. It was only later when I grew up that I realized that wasn't true. 나는 귀신이 진짜라고 생각하곤 했어요. 나중에 제가 자랐을 때 저는 그것이 사실이 아니라는 것을 깨달았습니다. Now, let's move on to the further discussion. Do you often listen to music while you work? Give details. 일하는 동안 음악을 자주 듣나요? No, because it can be very distracting. I love music, but when I listen to music, I like to sing along or I like to concentrate on the music. Sometimes I do have music in the background, but not very loud. 2번. Do you think you could work well with somebody playing a saxophone in your office? How could it affect you? 당신 사무실에서 색소폰을 연주하는 사람과 잘 어울릴 수 있을 것 같아요? 그게 당신에게 어떤 영향을 미치나요? No, of course not. Unless I worked at a saxophone store. I'm not a fan of the saxophone. I like jazz, some forms of jazz, but the saxophone is very loud. How am I supposed to concentrate? I would not be able to work well with somebody who played the saxophone in my office. Anyway, that wraps it up for today's lesson, and I'll see you on the next lesson.
Feet.
Feet.
Wide awake.
Wide awake.
Neural pathway.
Neural pathway.
Faculty.
Faculty.
Sedate.
Sedate.
Local anesthetic.
Local anesthetic.